Okay, so we can just go to our About Us, and I'll just quickly share a little bit about diversity. So we are a registered charity in British Columbia, dedicated to connecting people of all ages, groups, where we serve them through innovative and culturally safe programs, and we offer a wide range of services. So you guys are welcome to go on our website and check us out. We are at Surrey. We are located again in Surrey, BC, offering an array of programs, and apologies for having to quickly go through that, as I know we are on a time basis. So now just delving right into what this presentation is about, and I think it grounds us with asking us this question: how can larger settlement organizations like Diversity support BIPOC-led organizations build their capacity within this sector? And so we really did explore this question through the B.U.I.L.D.S project, which is an IRCC-funded project. And what it actually stands for is BIPOC Unified Inclusive Leading Development in the South Fraser. And so our goal was to increase the readiness of these BIPOC organizations to be able to apply for IRCC funding. So I know in the beginning of this year, there was that call for proposal, CFP 2024, that people nationally within the settlement organization were applying for. So our main goal was to try to increase that readiness to be able to participate. So within this presentation, we aim to share some of these key activities that we undertook within the B.U.I.L.D.S project, as well as highlight its impacts and discuss some of the challenges we did encounter, as this was a first of the capacity building work within diversity. And so also, while exploring what worked, what didn't, we really wanted to then give you guys some of the, cheat tools of how you can explore equitable pathways to build capacity for BIPOC organizations. And so just moving on. So what was this scope? And throughout the presentation, you'll see some photos of some of the work we've been doing in our participants. And so with this initiative, it wasn't just about securing financial support. I did mention that our overarching goal was to help, build up people's readiness, these organizations' readiness to apply for IRCC funding. However, at its core, we really wanted to support these organizations in exploring the complexities of the settlement sector so that they can be able to thrive without, just relying on larger settlement organizations, but essentially equipping them and supporting them through these complexities so that they can then go and sustain and do that work themselves. And while we were exploring the complexities that we all go through within the sector, we also address the systemic need for more equitable access to resources by providing organizations with practical tools like application templates, collaborative strategies, targeted training, and more, which we'll kind of unpack as the presentation goes on. And a key commitment for us was to level the playing field. So by providing organizations with practical tools, then that's in a way offering them, strengthening their readiness so that they feel like they're equipped enough to be able to access larger pools of funding. And so in turn, if they were successful in their applications, this would actually as well allow them to grow their capacity and expand their reach and serve even many more community members that they're already serving within the South Fraser region. And of course, this work couldn't be done alone. We did this with the support of our consultants. We did this with the support of the actual organizations who informed us on how to approach this capacity work. So it was very collaborative. And what we did was we wanted to amplify the impact of these organizations who are delivering these culturally responsive services while putting them on the map if, let's say, they weren't as recognized or acknowledged within this settlement pool. So how did we do that? So many programs are guided by goals. And so within this project, we had three main standout goals. If you want to just go back to the last slide. Oh, I guess that's okay. And so the three main goals that we had were: one, diversify IRCC funded services. So we aim to expand regional service delivery by increasing the participation of BIPOC-led organizations in this federal funded arena. So this essentially would ensure not only high quality services, but also create more inclusive and reflective pathways for these organizations who identify diverse needs within their community. So that's what we mean when we say diversify IRCC funded services. And then secondly, that kind of goes in relation to leveling the funding arena. So we work to break down barriers to funding so that organizations can access simplified application processes and provide and offer them tailored support. And we created these opportunities so that people didn't feel like they had to compete to access these resources, and create a more equal footing and playing field when we're talking about these applications. Because oftentimes when you are a larger multi-service funded organization who's gone through this application, you kind of know what to expect and what is already expected of you in terms of how to write out your application. So when we say create a more equitable process, that's by providing these organizations with, templates and a scope of what they should kind of stay within in terms of their parameters around the application. So that's what we mean by leveling the playing field, giving them access to this information. And then again, just amplify BIPOC leadership. So through mentorship, coaching, and skill building opportunities, we supported a lot of their executive directors who are mainly our participants within the project, so that they feel like they can strengthen their leadership and expand their influence and actually have a footing when it comes to informing on the needs of the settlement sector and what they're seeing from their spaces. So those were our 3 overarching goals. And so moving on from the scope, I kind of just shared this in relation. Our scope was, it was within a year, so a year-long pilot project, and we were addressing the need for equitable access to resources by leveling the playing field and strengthening the readiness of these organizations, again, to amplify their impact. And so that's where it aligns with the 3 goals that I kind of just went over. We can next slide. Oh, I guess our slides are playing a little trick on us today. And so we can't necessarily talk about B.U.I.L.D.S and supporting grassroots organizations and being a collaborative approach without actually identifying who some of these organizations are. So throughout the presentation, we'll be just showcasing some of these organizations and the strengths in which they come from and what they're already doing within this community. And so here is a standout example, Kingdom Acts Foundation, which is also known as KFA. So in this photo, you'll see Godwin and Blessing Uday. These are incredible leaders who we deeply respect within our community. They are the leaders and founders of the Kingdom Acts Foundation, and they joined B.U.I.L.D.S during the CFP, so the call for proposal in 2024. They joined during this process as they were navigating their first IRCC funding application, a common starting point for a lot of our organizations, a part of B.U.I.L.D.S. And so KFA is a multi-service organization dedicated to serving the African diaspora and beyond. They focus on social justice advocacy and equity, and their work spans in several key areas. And I think it's important to highlight some of the areas in which they serve community so that we have a better idea of what is a culturally responsive service and, why are we working to uplift and support BIPOC-led grassroots organizations within this space of capacity building. And so again, mentioning that word around culturally responsive. So they have an early learning program, which offers learning and childcare programs tailored to the needs of BIPOC children and families. So really coming from the standpoint of understanding what some of these families may need when it comes to childhood support. And so they do that through hybrid strategies and address barriers like limited internet access, because oftentimes, as newcomers are situating within this space, how are we supporting them navigating their barriers to even accessing the services we seek to offer them? And so that's a perspective that they bring within this program, as well as also offering capacity building and community integration initiatives. And they do that through skills training, mentorship, and settlement support. And so outside of supporting them through capacity building and building resilience to be able to really integrate and access the support they need within this space, they also have grassroots impact and partnerships. So they try to they work with local leaders and organizations across British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario. And they do this through sharing their best practices within their impactful programs, like they have a kids summer camp program, which has also gained recognition from local leaders and federal representatives because of the work they're doing at a local level. And so just really talking about them from a strength-based perspective, they are grassroots. And although we were supporting them and offering them resources and tools to feel better equipped to apply for an IRCC funding application, they're already coming from a strong positionality in the work that they're doing in community. And it's really important to highlight that. It wasn't us coming in and seeking to support them and offering them things that they don't already know. I think, again, it speaks to that leveling the playing field and giving them access to information that they may not have had so that they can feel more stronger and confident to apply for these larger pools of funding. And so as we talk about, our goals and who some of these organizations are, it's what did we do? How did we really engage these grassroots organizations in capacity building work? And I think this is where we're really trying to emphasize the pathways we took to capacity building. And so to achieve our goals, we implemented a series of targeted activities, and overarchingly, some of those activities were around research and needs assessment. So identifying the strengths and barriers within these organizations. We offered workshops and clinics that were IRCC focused, as well as offering tool development. We mentioned templates, and then webinars and mentorship. So that's just giving you a bird's eye view into some of the ways in which we implemented activities. But to just take it a little bit step forward, how did we do that? And that's when I'll be slowly passing it on to my colleague Daljit here. But so when it comes to capacity assessments, conducting comprehensive organizational assessments of 14 organizations, which I won't get too into that, as that's something that, I have a lovely partner over here who really engaged in that work with our organizations. When we're talking about workshops, we hosted capacity building sessions that were across different critical topics that we, coming from a lens of conveners, knowing that this is IRCC based, as well as tailored mentorship, providing that one-on-one support, and then again, offering tools and resources, webinars on specific topics. And I think the importance around the webinars and why they were implemented within this program is because things need to be self-paced. As I mentioned, we were working with a lot of executive directors within their organizations. So these are individuals who have limited capacity. So being able to offer them support outside of the in-person or virtual sessions was important. And it's a sustainable piece and a self-paced piece within this program. And then again, networking opportunities. How are we, connecting these grassroots organizations to other organizations or networks that we feel like could benefit through collaboration? And we did that through speed networking events, as well as some facilitated engagement. And so as I talk a little bit about our key activities and what went on, this is also just like an overarching picture of all of the things that we engaged on. And I think when it comes to IRCC language and when you're funded by an IRCC program, the language is activities. So for the sake of that, I kind of just helped us visualize how much activities we engaged in, which was about 16. But I'm going to now pass it on to my colleague Daljit to really tap into the work that herself and her colleagues did within the B.U.I.L.D.S project. So
awesome. Thank you, Samaya. And you can keep doing this part here. It would be helpful. And I can do this side. So hello, everyone. You're watching Samaya and I coordinate live and face tech challenges as we're doing this. So appreciate your patience on this. So as Samaya said, this slide talks about the 16 activities that were within the IRCC-funded B.U.I.L.D.S project. And we were engaged with this work on behalf of QRG. So QRG is a consulting firm. It's a provincial consulting research group where myself, Jacqueline, and three others from the team, Francis, Christine, Lisa, all came together to support diversity in their B.U.I.L.D.S project. QRG as a consulting firm has been operating in BC since 2008. And as a team, we've done a lot of work around EDI, both locally here and nationally and internationally as well. And our approach is on anti-racism, anti-oppression, and decolonizing approaches to research and data collection, and using, of course, a GBA plus approach. We're also leaders who have been doing work from a community engagement perspective. And though that skill set really was important as we did the deeper work with the grassroots organizations. So from the QRG perspective, in our responsibility for the B.U.I.L.D.S project, to diversity and to the B.U.I.L.D.S project, is that we had 6 main goals that sat, you can consider underneath or overarching on top of the 16 activities that were listed in the IRCC grant. Our goal, first and foremost, was to assess the readiness and capacity of up to 20 participating organizations called Stream A and Stream B to help them successfully apply for federal funding. The second goal was to develop tailored capacity building and strengthening plans for these organizations. And to support their capacity, we provided customized coaching to 10 of the Stream B organizations, and we reviewed and offered feedback on their grant applications for the Stream B partners. So the Stream A and Stream B partners is looking at the difference of those who are ready to do deeper work versus those organizations who are in for the education and training components. And goals 5 and 6 is that we designed and delivered 4 boot camps, which I think we changed the name to strengthening sessions, right? Boot camps is how we refer to them, in that there's a lot to go through in a short period of time. But part of our capacity approach is recognizing that the organizations themselves brought in assets. They had a foundation from which we were drawing on in terms of offering our support to them. So it became a co-design and collaborative model. And from there, we delivered our boot camps, our strengthening sessions to help on the areas of improvement that they identified for us for the participating organizations. And lastly, we created 5 short online modules to build and strengthen capacity in the specific areas that were identified to us by the organizations themselves. So in the initial assessment, we wanted to understand, where is it that the organizations had capacity already and experience, and where is it that they wanted to build more capacity and strengthen their capacity? And you can imagine when you're working with grassroots nonprofits, they are all in various stages of development. Some were very small, had never done an application before, and others were slightly graduated from that, in that they were still smaller grassroots nonprofits, but had completed several other applications and were looking to build out their capacity, potentially through the anticipated federal funding call that we knew was going to come during the duration of the B.U.I.L.D.S project. So in order to assess where they were at from a capacity perspective, we had every organization complete a very in-depth survey, which helped us understand their knowledge base and capacity from many angles: their financial literacy, their partnership capacity, their experience in terms of having written an application before, their governance models inside their organization and their board structure, staffing models, etc. We really needed to get a good snapshot of each organization as an organization, so we could then understand where we could inject our support and services to help build their capacity. This is a snapshot of some of the boot camps that we offered. So when we started B.U.I.L.D.S, what happened is the CFP 2024 came out shortly after, faster than we expected at that point. And what it did is it enabled us to do a pivot to support the organizations who wish to apply for the IRCC funding and concentrate our efforts for them and that application. And we used the IRCC funding as an example of how you go through a process of understanding the funding call, applying for the funding call, and hopefully being successful for that funding call. So what it did was allow us to go really deep, specific to the IRCC funding, but along the way, we coached those organizations to understand that this process is not unlike other RFP processes out there. And we wanted the organizations to, even if they weren't going to apply for the IRCC funding, to go through the steps with us so we could educate and coach along the way, because there's nothing better than a real live RFP to understand the complications and opportunities that are within an RFP. So you'll see here on the screen, we created several IRCC specific clinics, we started calling them, which was a regular meeting opportunity. We held some in person. A lot of them were virtual and online to help the organizations build capacity. And those clinics offered drop-in space for where we as a consulting team provided information and context related to the grant. We attended many of the orientations, information sessions government offered as well, so we could help translate some of that for the organizations. But it was also a drop-in space where organizations could come to us and talk to us about where they were at in their application process, and we can help demystify some of what was being asked. As you can imagine, the IRCC funding is very specific, very complicated, and for a grassroots organization, it's a big step to try to compete in that space. Being successful with that funding is a separate outcome. The fact that many of our organizations were able to apply within that stream, within CFP 2024 was a major successful outcome from how we observed the development and role of those organizations. And so we held the clinics ongoingly, and there was always a theme to each of the sessions. And if the theme is what the organizations wanted to learn more about, that's great. And if they wanted us to do deeper work with them on a specific part of their application, we did that as well. So even in a virtual space, we were able to provide that group, but also targeted support as well. And by targeted support individual space, we could pull into a chat room and work one-on-one with an organization. So we were able to deploy a variety of ways in which we could support the organizations. And you'll see here just from the dates, in particular, we were holding weekly sessions for the organizations up until the RFP was due. And we adjusted the time of when we held the clinics to meet the needs of the organizations. For example, we had heard originally that a daytime clinic would be helpful and an evening clinic would be helpful. Over time, we heard, well, really, none of the executive directors or their assigned staff could make it to the daytime, and they preferred an evening and a weekend. So we adjusted as a QRG team along the way to ensure that our services were available to the grassroots organizations when they needed them the most. And of course, for any of you in the audience who have been a part of a grassroots organization, you know that much of the work we do when we are managing or leading or co-founding or founding a grassroots organization is that that work is happening off the side of your life, which means evenings and weekends. So as a consultant team, we were very mindful of when and how our organizations needed support. And so we ensured that our process supported their engagement and their capacity in the best possible way. And so on this slide, what I wanted to mention is that when we did these surveys with the groups, we were able to develop tailored and detailed capacity building plans for each of the organizations. And so from there, what we did was create a mentoring task list, is what we called it, for the 10 Stream B organizations. So we pulled from the survey where we saw that they needed support. And from there, we created a mentorship task list, which really provides the core functions of all the areas you would want to include or consider when you're completing an application. And that mentoring task list could apply to other funding streams as well. So in addition to the task list, we also created a list of other funding opportunities. So organizations would know about those and be able to benefit from those, or hopefully apply for those. And out of that mentoring task list, what happened then was it gave us the space to do the customized coaching to the organization. So they could bring the task list to the coaching space, and then we could work with them one-on-one or in a group setting related to the tasks that they want to support on. And then we were also clear as well what they needed. In terms of the organizations, many of them, even having had submitted several small grant applications in past, still required significant organizational development support. And that included things such as developing partnerships, not knowing how to design a budget where they factored in rental costs or insurance costs related to their partnership models, et cetera. So we provided very detailed support around how you complete a successful grant application. And so on this screen, what you see is our goals 4 and 5. So through the mentorship list, then we created specific activity lists with some of the organizations who wanted to have a chance to practice out designing activities that they would include in the IRCC grant or in other grant applications, and to design a budget that matched their activity lists. The budget piece was where we spent quite a bit of time with some of the organizations, because in many cases they had not designed a budget at all before. So having a rubric around the kind of considerations that those of us who've been in the sector for a while, we know to include, such as, program supplies, mileage, et cetera. Those things are not intuitive when you haven't completed an application before. And in some cases, you may not even be from the nonprofit sector to know this from your day job. And so we spend time with the organizations to help build their capacity from that perspective. And we delivered the 4 boot camps, as mentioned, that were in person and online. And the boot camps focused on content area that became obvious through the original survey, and matching up diversities, activities that they had included to get the B.U.I.L.D.S grant. So it was a combination of bringing those pieces together. And for us as consultants who have completed many grant applications, to understand here's the kind of training and development areas that would be beneficial. And we included these areas as we met with the organizations, provided the training for them, and created a space for them to network and develop bonds with each other. I think that's one of the side benefits of this project, is that by virtue of meeting in person, having a meal together, getting to know the story of the founder or the executive director, what brought them to that organization, what inspired them to design that organization and its mission and vision and who they were wanting to serve. What it did is it created a networking space for those organizations who were all small in their financial capacity, but big in terms of their aspiration. And that networking space, I believe, created a strong foundation for some of those organizations to then connect with each other outside of the B.U.I.L.D.S project. And I believe we did hear that in the evaluation as well. We certainly heard and felt that when we met in person and learned together, but also shared a meal together. As for goal 6, here are some of the examples of the online modules that we created. They were on research and data, so understanding the difference between using research and data to complete a grant application, how to use a gender-based analysis approach in your grant application, how to develop a logic model for that specific grant or as an organization, and to see then how other grants and opportunities could fit under your broader organizational logic model. using online resources that are available to complete grants and contribution agreements, and other topics such as capacity and engagement readiness assessment tools. In speaking with our organizations, what we heard from the onset is that 73% of participants reported that they had no knowledge with the purpose and condition and about the purpose and the conditions of a contribution agreement. So really in specific to IRCC language. The vast majority of our participants indicated, that was 90%, that they had either little or no knowledge about the funding streams available to them through BC settlement and integration services and skills and training. 73% of our participants reported that they do not know the role of a local immigrant partnership, a LIP, to support the settlement sector, while 10% of the participants indicated that they did know. And this stat is particularly important. I sit on our Surrey LIP. If we have 73% of our grassroots nonprofits who do not know the value and role of a local LIP, the local immigrant partnership, and its role in the settlement sector, what it does is it creates space to be disengaged from what is happening in the broader sector. So for the grassroots organizations, how do they know about sector trends and sector capacity and building partnerships if they don't know about the LIP and they cannot participate in the LIP? So this was an area that we paid strong attention to and worked to create the network inside the B.U.I.L.D.S program. So these organizations had some sense of that unity and knowledge sharing and capacity building within the safe space that was available to them evenings and weekends, as I said. 73% of participants reported that they had either little or no experience using the iCare database or even using databases more generally. And 27% indicated that they had some experience with iCare and other databases. And as all of us know from the settlement sector, databases are really critical in settlement and other sectors, such as children serving sectors, that if you don't know how to utilize your database, input data, the kind of outcomes that you can pull, the data you can pull, it may not strengthen your application, even in your first round of it. So this was also important. We refer to data a lot throughout our sessions and gave examples to the organizations so that they could understand the role of validated data could play in strengthening their application and also pulling data from the sector if they didn't have it inside their own organization. And finally, 64% of participants reported that they had little or no experience setting up spreadsheets for service delivery tracking. And 18% said they had some experience, and closer to 20% said they considered themselves experienced, and even 9% said they were experts in setting up spreadsheets. I don't know that I would ever say that I'm an expert in setting up a spreadsheet. I'm always learning. This was another important service area as part of B.U.I.L.D.S. It wasn't only to provide information on how to design and complete a grant application. It was also learning how to implement a project and measure your success and accountabilities so that you could use your data for future grants, but also be successful in the grant that you had achieved. So setting up spreadsheets for service delivery tracking is critical for organizations, and particularly the smaller ones, because what you don't want to be in a position of is getting a grant and then not being able to be successful in your promises made for the grant. This slide is just an example of the fact that it's a nice visual that we developed the individual and customized mentorship task lists for each of the organizations. And finally, well, not finally yet, but another area that we learned about when we did the initial assessment with the organizations is that this is going back to the point around the local immigrant partnership, is that many organizations, over 90%, said that they didn't understand their role as a small organization in the broader ecosystem. And not only from a service delivery side, but in terms of being able to network and develop strong partnerships. we saw those organic partnerships and dialogue happen when we met in person. And the reason we paid attention to this in terms of a small organization understanding where they are at in terms of the broader ecosystem is that it's really important to how you shape your rationale and your purpose and your organizational fit within the broader ecosystem. So if you don't know as an organization what specific gap you are filling and your purpose in filling that and how that integrates or supports the broader ecosystem, you may not have as strong of an application as you would if you were able to articulate that as part of your rationale. So we worked with the organizations to help them understand this image here, which is where are you as an individual in the broader ecosystem, in the settlement sector or the children's sector, after school, youth sector, and some of our organizations were around volunteerism and food delivery. So the organizations we work with are supporting and providing services in a variety of spaces that exist in the social service sector, and we wanted them to understand that the broader ecosystem so they could name their place in that. And this slide shows some examples of our explanation to the organizations around partnerships. What does it mean to be in a lead and subcontract relationship? What does it mean to partner with other organizations, municipalities for space, etc.? What kind of documentation exists in the field as LOU, MOU, partnership agreements? So we went through those explanations with the organizations. We wanted, as part of the ecosystem analysis, is have the organizations understand where does your service complement an existing service, or where are you competing with others? And so being able to be clear on your value add as an organization around that. Part of this is also where if you're engaging in a partnership with another organization are your values aligned? Do you have mutuality in terms of what you agree to do together? Do you have trust and transparency in your partnership agreement? Are you going to work together now on a specific project, but alone in the future? How do you have that kind of dialogue with a partner for a grant? These are important conversations for new emerging grassroots organizations to consider because you can inadvertently get into a partnership that may not work for you in the future, or you didn't have initial discussion that beyond the term of this agreement, you would be going your separate ways, and that can create hurt feelings. And in a sector that is, while as large as ours, we're actually very small. And many of us are in this field for many years. So we want to ensure that the organizations understood some of the risks and opportunities of partnership, but to ensure that you're having transparent dialogue right from the beginning and knowing some of those potential pitfalls that could occur later. And it was our job as consultants to bring up some of those risk pieces. And finally, so we cover some of the basic things like insurance coverage for partners. Are you covered? Is your partners covered? And the difference between being nonprofit and having charitable status. So next, I think we're going to go to the spotlight.
Yes. Thank you so much, Daljeet, for just being able to cover all that went on within one consultancy group. So we worked really closely with the QRG team to really be able to offer tangible support to these organizations. And I think what came out of it was understanding that everyone has a unique need. And it was great to see the team really try to adjust and be flexible to the type of mentorship and service and mentorship that they were offering or organizations, which I think will touch in on the challenges and just recommendations throughout that in the end of our presentation. So just another spotlight moment for another grassroots organization. And something to point out was each organization came at a different starting point. With what we saw with Kingdom Acts Foundation is they have been established. They have, offered many service programs. They, serve a unique audience. But when considering the International Refugees and Support Foundation, so this was a specific organization that came to us really looking to start their start their work in terms of that budget support, right? Trying to access larger pools of funding, but then really trying to break down, okay, how do I develop a budget, or how do I develop an application that really speaks to my need and who I'm trying to support? And so with IRSF Foundation, they received funding through donations. And so that would be donations, whether that's food supply, furniture, and the executive director, Nusrat Haq, who is the woman in the photo here, she would physically go with her partner and her daughter to go and deliver these goods to certain community members who would be calling her and accessing her through just direct line. And with someone who, you know, really has a passion to support community and was doing this kind of really, something Daljeet always said is grassroots starts at that basement, right? You start at that really local basement level. And this is what IRSF was doing. And so when they came to B.U.I.L.D.S, they were really seeking to build out what it would look like to receive funding and what it would look like to break down our programming and what a budget would look like. So just sharing a little about how we had different levels of organization, and the engagement we were doing with certain organizations were different, but IRS at its core and heart is to give back to community, and she cannot stop because the need exists every single day. So just wanted to spotlight that example as well. And just some photos where it just kind of adds, as this was our speed networking event, an opportunity to really connect with one another, meet other members within the settlement sector that they may not have met before. And again, that's Nusrat in her beautiful, colorful hijab in the photo there, engaging with another B.U.I.L.D.S participant, career mode, Jessica, who is to her left, maybe our right side. And yeah, so just another photo, just kind of showing the engagement pieces of our program and what we tried to create. And it was an ecosystem of new community and collaboration. And then again, this was at our wrap-up event held at Diversity's event space location. And again, we're always engaged in like just deep conversation and getting to know each other. And oftentimes you don't have the time to do that. So B.U.I.L.D.S was a really nice space to be able to have that one-on-one learning about one another. And this is kind of an example of some of our online materials that we have stored on our B.U.I.L.D.S webpage. So we have the asynchronous webinars that the QRG team had supported us with, which we have on a learning management system that if you have user access, you can go in and access that service. However, we also offered about 5 webinars just on our B.U.I.L.D.S website from different leaders in the community. We had Ryan Drew, the director of integrated services at Success, do just kind of a lived experience webinar around some of the things that she's maneuvered as a director and has worn different hats within the settlement sector. So that was a great perspective. And then again, engaging the local immigration partnership on a connect and learn session, because that statistic around how 90% of the organizations weren't aware of what a local immigration partnership is and how they're also connected to umbrella organizations like AMSA, and how we can get involved with organizations tables like the LIP table, or organizations like AMSA who offer overarching resources within the sector about what's happening. And oftentimes maybe you don't have the time to always engage within that material, that these are great hubs to kind of funnel that information. So again, we saw a need and we were able to fill it through just on the cusp webinars with people that were willing to volunteer their time, which was great. And so with every program, there comes challenges. As we've mentioned, this is a pilot project, something very new and fresh, and we're lucky to have partners who are flexible and able to, inject some change and knowledge within this space of learning what best practices are when it comes to engaging grassroots organizations or just individuals with capacity building. And the first one that really stood out to us were the compensation limitations. And this was a very key challenge that was faced among the B.U.I.L.D.S project, as because it was a pilot, it was limited funding as well. And I think with many people who understand IRCC funding contract agreements, funding guidelines can be very restricted on how we can distribute our financial support to, let's say, our clients that we're seeking to serve, or in this case, the organizations that we were seeking to support through capacity building. So how we could allocate that funds was very restricted, and knowing that it was hard to not be able to compensate individuals who are seeking to build their organizational capacity as well as their service delivery with no equity behind that. And I think maybe this is something, I don't know, Daljit, if you'd want to touch on a little bit in terms of that limitation that arise within your conversations within the grassroots organizations.
Yeah, it's something that QRG advocates for quite strongly, is that when we ask grassroots organizations or racialized individuals to partake in sessions, even though they may be educative and helpful to them, is that how do we find a way to compensate them for their involvement? Because that is also part of building capacity. You know, as organizations, we can educate and provide training videos, etc. But to recognize that these individuals were working on this nonprofit off the side of their life, as I said, away from their 9 to 5. Our belief is that we need to find ways to compensate them for their time, so that we as a society respect the value of our grassroots organizations in being contributing organizations to a healthier and better society. And so we did provide that feedback back to diversity and B.U.I.L.D.S of, can we consider that for future iterations of B.U.I.L.D.S, if that's possible, that there is some sort of honorarium stipend way to financially compensate organizations that are participating.
Yes, thank you. So just moving on to the next challenge that we faced was time constraints for participants, which myself and LG have touched on, because many of our participants were organizational leaders, often serving as EDs with full-time responsibilities. It did make it difficult to participate in every single capacity building opportunity that we had offered. And so their involvement in the program, again, was volunteer-based, and they did their personal time. And that's why there had to be some accommodations to the timing in which we were offering our sessions or one-on-one mentorship. And so when it came to the scheduling challenges, we tried to minimize conflicts, but again, it was something that arose. And I think this speaks to the next challenge around diverse organizational stages. So many of the organizations were at different stages of their development. And so some were starting out, others had already established operations. And so this did require us to provide tailored support and resources to meet the unique needs of each organization. But again, we're considering, I was a team of one on top of just having our consultant group, which I'm very grateful for. So you could see how even capacity within our own team was limited in being able to tailor our support and when we were available to each unique organization and stage that we're at. So it's something to really consider as you offer capacity building support and how many people are on your team. And then finally, just limited in-person interaction. So we had primarily a virtual format so that things could be as accessible as possible. And sessions were also offered to be recorded and placed again on our B.U.I.L.D.S webpage if you weren't able to come to a live recording. And so we found this to be a challenge because every time we would all connect and meet, there was a need for more interaction, more collaborative opportunities, and to be able to sustain these new relationships we're all building so that we can then go on and incorporate these new relations and connecting points in our work. So that was a challenge, it being a year-long pilot project, trying to offer these resources and services and wanting to do more, but again, everything was just kind of limited and confined to that. But if there's any other challenge you felt like you may have identified, this is the time with you to share.
I think these are explicit overarching challenges, but I think I'd like to just underscore the space for that in-person relationship development piece with our grassroots organizations. Is, you know, they're often just the one employee executive director in name only, not in compensation, delivering on really important services for our communities across, you know, Metro Vancouver and beyond. And having space to build a relationship, develop trust is really critical to get into the deep roots of organizational development. These are not, big organizations where they're used to formal processes, and that's often not what grassroots organizations are trying to achieve. So when we think about ways in which we can build an equity and inclusion and decolonize, that stems from the place of having time, developing trust, and building relationships. And I would say that if you're considering equity work with grassroots organizations, is to factor that in from the beginning as much as possible, and assume that how much time you factored in, you've already underestimated it. And so it'll always be longer, and you'll need more time than you would imagine to ensure that you build that in from the beginning as sufficiently as possible for the work to happen in a meaningful way.
And I think Delji just perfectly aligned us to our recommendations.
Yes.
Which QRG team was really great at supporting us through their final report of the B.U.I.L.D.S project, coupled with, actually asking the organizations what they would recommend going forward in our final survey with them. So this is a series of recommendations developed by QRG team and what they had witnessed in their time as mentors to the grassroots organizations, as well as surveying the grassroots organizations who also felt like there's always room for improvement, as well as myself, just being someone who got to observe everything that was going on in B.U.I.L.D.S and what I intaked from, again, our audiences. So again, first and foremost, provide honorariums to our participants. Offering financial compensation is so important. And I think this is something that we are talking about within this space of settlement, whether that it's offering honorariums to individuals with lived experience, Indigenous folks who are offering their knowledge, their key expert knowledge on truth and reconciliation and those pathway forwards as newcomers integrate into Canada. So I think that was like a big forefront. And with the CFP 2024 that was released in February, there was greater financial compensation and equity behind that call for proposal. So depending on the future, that component definitely was in the call out for capacity building. So that's really great to see that change within the application. Host workshops on site. So this was a great recommendation I think QRG made, where it was like maybe going to these grassroots organizations offices, seeing the work that they're doing and meeting them where they're at, right? And not necessarily always allowing individuals to come to you, but meeting them where they're at and getting a full scope of the work that they're doing and how much time is going into their programs and services and themselves to get a full scope understanding of why there's capacity constraints at times. There was also increased personalized one-on-one support. Like we both have mentioned, each organization came at a different developmental stage. So maybe next time around having certain, consultants or engagement pieces that speaks to the unique stages so that individuals don't feel inclined to come to everything, but something that serves them, and us having a better idea of how to offer that tailored one-on-one support. I really love the start with small grants training. That's also another great recommendation by our QRG team. This was something I think that spoke to the fact that some of our participants weren't ready, didn't feel, comfortable or confident enough to apply to the CFP, as it's such a large application. And when you're asking grassroots organizations as well as larger settlement organizations to visualize 5 years of funding within a 1 month to 2 month time span, that can be difficult. And I think we all can speak to that. Whoever has engaged within a CFP application, you see how time consuming it is, how much visualization you have to do, how much concise language you have to do to make sure that you're really identifying a need, showcasing an outcome, and so forth, especially when it comes to our logic model. So maybe offering smaller grants so that they can start there and then build out into those larger funding opportunities. And then improve IRCC application accessibility. I think this spoke to when we were writing, well, not myself, when whoever visioned out this, who is my lovely director, who visioned out this grant when it first came about, was how can we also speak to IRCC in a language of, can we rethink about the provisions in which we make these applications? Like, is it are you developing these applications where you're considering some of the diverse needs of these organizations, whether you're a small grassroots organization or a larger grassroots organization, meaning how we track and monitor and share our stories of how we're offering services and programs may look different. And, Daljit speaking to the need of spreadsheets and tracking and being able to identify how many targets you're meeting and being able to quantify that and then qualify, be able to put that in plain language where people can see that you are meeting a need within community can be difficult. So just thinking about the provisions in which we create these applications, whether that's language, whether that's, the documents that are being requested of us. So that's something that we really try to put within our recommendations and report after builds. And then finally, strengthen program inclusivity and impact. So each program may be unique. And I see the time check of 10 minutes, and I definitely want to just get right into our program impact and share a quick little video and take any questions. So strengthening program impact is the last one we have here, and just making sure we're incorporating feedback and all that. So just gonna.
Sounds good. One more spotlight.
One more spotlight. I don't know if
Dignidad?
you want to share about Dignidad.
Sure. Dignidad Migrant Society is one of the organizations we worked with. And oh my gosh, this organization with such minimal dollars was serving over 70,000 temporary foreign workers in its 18 years. Over 37 different service sites at no charge, including assistance regarding legal, medical, and employment-related challenges. This group was just astonishing. And when they say an organization packs a big punch, these guys were it. Their key values are around mutual help, transforming community, and having a collective voice. Raul, who was the lead that we worked with from Dignidad Society, very articulate around the needs of temporary foreign workers, and had been advocating to government and key decision makers and policymakers around the needs for this group, and just a real gem in the grassroots nonprofit world, and brought so much joy and humor to the spaces when we met. And as you can see from this picture, he was our strength building ED. And so just so grateful to have this organization be a part of our group.
Yes. And even to highlight, they are one of the individuals that did apply to the CFP 2024. And I think that's where we just get to our program impact. I love how Daljit in the beginning said what was successful to us was that some of these, we did increase the readiness to apply to an application, which was a big overarching goal. And so of the 14 organizations that we had worked with, about 7 organizations applied to the CFP 2024, which showcased an increase in readiness to acquire federal support. And within that, there about 71% of participants reported a satisfaction to our work, which was always positive to hear. And 57% found that the mentorship was extremely beneficial. Having that one-on-one great support from Daljit and her team really helped them feel like they weren't in this alone. And some of those key areas that they found were beneficial was the mentorship, the conversations around budgeting. Daljit offered a really great asynchronous webinar around budgeting and how to put that into motion so they have that legacy to go back and refer to, as well as in general proposal development really supported them. We had weekly IRCC clinics that hosted different topics, from how do you write an activity description to budget to how do you showcase that you're targeting an outcome or a need within your service. And then in general, just testimonials from participants said that it was a very supportive environment and it did boost their organizational confidence, as well as the skills that they were acquiring from the program has really benefited them in being able to offer community support from just the knowledge that we shared. So that's always a great thing to hear. And this was all done just through a final survey. We asked our participants as well as just verbal testimony. We also feel like we've built a strong sector of collaboration, like a new ecosystem of who you can go to when you're looking for certain supports, which was great. And then ultimately the program empowered organizations to move forward with greater confidence and capability that they're doing this work in the sector and that they can navigate the complexities of federal funding. And they feel this way because there's someone there that has tried to offer some support as conveners. So I think diversity does not take that lightly. Being conveners of this project, being a larger organization who has accessed federal funding, it was so important for us to be that support for the sector, and also it be beneficial to us because we're learning about new organizations. We're collaborating with emerging organizations that are already established, which why wouldn't we want to be connected to that? And so, yeah, I think in general, just the work that we did through this project is just like a testament of more long-term benefits of connectivity, sharing, cross collaboration, promotion, not gatekeeping, really breaking down that barrier and understanding that resources are scarce, but if we share best practices and support one another, that's the ultimate impact. And I think this is just some photos of the real individuals who made impact are the organizations themselves, my leaders within my organizations who really supported me through this work are consultants. So at the heart of it is individuals helping one another and sharing. And I think we'll just jump into these videos. May not be able to show these videos.
I think we might be out of time now.
Yes.
So maybe we'll take a couple minutes now for any questions, and our apologies. We wanted to leave more time for questions, but we also had a lot that we wanted to share with you, and we hope that you found that beneficial. So we'll take any questions or comments, and I don't think there is any in the chat right now, but let's double check that. But the floor is open.
Thank you, Samaya and Daljit. My name is Samson. I work for ISS of BC. I'm a settlement worker, but my question is regarding individuals who start grassroots organizations but yet don't move a needle. And on the same token, there could be many more who operate under that category but haven't done anything for the community that they have applied for the funds for. So that could be an organizational issue, but in this case, what will the advice be, or is there a way that the IRCC could sort of say move out of the way and give a chance to people who really want to do something for their community?
It sounds like that's feedback you would be providing IRCC if you had concerns of an organization that's collecting funds and perhaps not delivering in the way in which you feel would be appropriate. That's not something we can speak to from an IRCC perspective. But I don't know if there's I don't know how you give that feedback to IRCC, but.
Yes, I also think that in our 3 overarching goals through B.U.I.L.D.S and what was written on the application was introducing new players to the funding arena, as well as leveling the playing field. So I think what I said as I was engaging with grassroots organizations in the beginning was that there's clearly a gap in who's accessing IRC services. So I think you're identifying something that is true. And by IRCC injecting funding specifically for BIPOC-led grassroots organizations, it speaks to addressing a gap within these organizations being able to access their funding. So I think we're there, but we're still working towards rectifying that gap and finding solutions to even out that playing field. So I hope that gives you just, some perspective and around your question or comment.
Thank you, Samson. And Mitch?
Thank you both.
Thank you, Samson.
Hi there. I'm sorry, my internet was kind of cutting out when you asked us a question at the end there. Was it sort of like, what have we done to kind of support. Yeah, okay. So yeah, something that we've done. I'm the local immigration partnership in Portage la Prairie, and I'm hosted by a community development organization. So we're very involved in community development, and we helped a neighboring First Nation apply for the Rural Transit Solutions Fund. So they're going to be getting a $4.5 million fully electric transit system to be implemented in our region. So we're super excited about that. Just curious, were any of the organizations that you helped support to apply for IRCC funding Indigenous led?
No,
No.
actually, none of our organizations were Indigenous led, but
Okay.
that's something to really like think about. We had Indigenous engagement. We had an Indigenous knowledge holder come in and speak to, like, create a webinar around how can grassroots organizations better engage with Indigenous communities, as often some of them have come from lens of being immigrants themselves and still mending that or working towards that relationship. But yeah, I think it's something to consider when we're looking at BIPOC, right? Because BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. So
Yeah, and I just think it's a sort of a reckoning that our sector is going to have to come to eventually, where Indigenous people really should be the ones that are helping invite people to the land, that kind of thing. So, just I think this probably is going to be sort of a revolution that comes, but I guess just maybe not this funding cycle.
Thank you for sharing. And thank you for the work you've done to support the organization and nation around securing funding. It's really great news. So we are past 5 o'clock. We would have loved to take more questions, but feel free to connect with us in other ways. I do believe this has been recorded, as you know, and so this will be available, I'm sure, through Feedloop or another mechanism for P2P conference attendees. And thank you so much for your engagement and comments in the chat box.
yes, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Bye for now.